Hi everyone, welcome to Cloudflare. Seeing a few familiar faces. I'm Lizzie, I'm a developer advocate at Cloudflare based here, and I make a lot of AI demos, and I've seen a few of you at AI meetups here. Can I get a raise of hands if you've used Cloudflare before? Do you think you know what Cloudflare is? I'm here to tell you that you do not. That's why I was hired like a year ago. There's an entire Cloudflare developer stack, so you can build full stack applications, all on Cloudflare. We have servers around the world for edge computing, so your websites are extremely fast. We also have AI models at the edge, that's some AI, AI observability, LLM observability, vector databases, storage options, which we'll be seeing Cloudflare D1 SQL database in a Dagger agent very soon. Compute, like Cloudflare workers, edge computing. Yeah. And there are no slides here, so this agenda is in the GitHub repo, which will be linked at the end via QR code. And now it's time for a Dagger times Cloudflare demo. Woo. Okay. And all in the terminal. I gave this last week. Oh, I need to clear that. I gave this demo last week via MCP server, so it's slightly different, but similar. We're going to run Dagger to start. And I've been getting into podcasts. Anyone here listen to podcasts? Yes. Okay. And I've been saving them to a D1 database, generating them and saving them. So we can search podcasts. That's one of our tools. Anyone want to search for an AI podcast? Okay. Latent Space, yeah. Swix speaks here pretty regularly, and as an aside, he should be here doing yoga on a rooftop Friday morning. I'll throw up the QR code for that event later. Okay. We're going to search podcasts for AI, and I just copied and pasted, like all good programmers do, to some environment variables, some secrets. We have my Cloudflare account ID, my Cloudflare D1 database ID, and a Cloudflare API token, which has read-write permissions for both workers AI, so you can run open source models on Cloudflare. Beta models are free, and also for D1, our SQL database. And that is running. And look, I did generate some podcasts about Rootly AI, which hosted Hack Night last week I was at, and AI agents. And we can recommend podcast. I want a podcast that is happy. So that is the query string I'm passing to the recommend podcast tool. And again, I'm going to paste my environment variables there. And the Dagger docs did tell me that that's how I should use my environment variables, pass them to Dagger. And there's other ways as well, but I did not use those. They recommend running. There's a running podcast in the D1 database. Taylor Swift. I did generate a Taylor Swift podcast. Dogs. And that was what someone at the last Hack Night wanted a podcast about. We can get previous podcasts. And you could pass like limit, like 7, some number, but default is 10. Again, pasted environment variables. Pass that to that tool. And the last 10 that I generated were Valkyries, the new WNBA team in San Francisco, WNBA. Prada, I don't know why I was feeling that. Golden Gate Park. If you're in town for conferences this week, would recommend Golden Gate Park. All-American Girls Professional Baseball League was feeling historical. Large language models. Solomon Hikes, who he is excited to see his keynote tomorrow. Daniel Lurie, I'm just like, why not? And these all have the dates that they were generated, the URLs, and the slug. And the slug will be very important because right now we're going to generate a podcast with the Generate Podcast tool. What do we want to generate a podcast about? Dagger. I think I did that one already. Anyone else? Huh? Rick Astley. That is funny, Abel. And we can see my D1 database, and I'm pretty sure I did do Dagger before. But Rick Astley. Okay. The Slug, Never Gonna Give You Up story. Awesome news, your podcast all about Rick Astley is ready and waiting for you to tune in. Dive into the insights, stories, and all things Rick by listening right here. And I have it hosted at Cloudflare Worker with the generated slug. Let's check it out. My sound is on, so. No podcast is generated, it's just rickrolling you via Cloudflare Worker. But it would be very easy. So here's an idea for the hack night. Build a podcast generating agent. And we can see our saved D1 podcasts, MCP, tennis running, Rootly AI. Pretty sure I did actually do Dagger this afternoon, AI agents. Yeah. GitHub repo is here. I will throw up the QR code soon. And we can quickly look at some code. I thought it was pretty easy to build with Dagger. Why can't I check those off? Ugh. Markdown. Okay. Hit Cloud Worker, save podcast to D1. We'll see Llama 3.2 on Cloudflare Workers AI. Here is our agent class. Generate podcast takes in a query. Base URL is optional, but I have my Cloudflare Worker URL, podcaster.lizziepica.workers.dev, because it's my account, haha. Cloudflare account ID, database ID, and Cloudflare API token are optional because you don't need to save it to the database. I just felt like it. I actually added that part earlier this morning. Generate an LLM slug using we call generate LLM slug. Create a DAG environment with a query and generated URL, the input podcast topic. And here's where we pass in the prompt with prompt. Very naming things is hard, but that makes sense. Thank you, Dagger. You're an enthusiastic podcast producer who just created an amazing new podcast episode. A user requested a podcast about input query. You can see the full prompt later on, but I feel like the hardest part, I feel like you had to deceive the LLM in order for it to return a URL. An issue with Claude last week when I gave a similar demo of this as an MCP server, Claude would not give the URL. It was like, that's not a podcast. I was like, yes, I'm trying to rickroll someone. So the Claude and LLM here thinks this is indeed a podcast generated via agent. If these account credentials exist, save podcast to D1, generate LLM-based slug. I'm going to scroll for more fun functions. Generate slug, which is about the user input. So sometimes it would be like /WNBA if the query was WNBA, but I was like, no, make it more like WNBA insights or something. Get previous podcasts could take this optional limit number, else default is 10. Again, we have our DAG object, and then we have our with secret variables, which is how I passed it Cloudflare account ID, database ID, and API token. And then ran this curl request to save it to Cloudflare D1 using SQL. I feel like I've written more SQL while at Cloudflare in the past year than ever before. Well, I've had LLM assistance, of course. Format the results for how it's displayed from the agent's output, generated on the state, URL, podcast URL, and the slug. Recommend podcast takes in the preference, that's the necessary parameter, API token, Cloudflare database ID, optional because, again, you do not need to save it, but nice to have. Query the database with the secret variables, and then post to Cloudflare D1 with SQL. I'm going to look for the Llama call. This is how you call Llama with a curl request on Cloudflare Workers AI. And you can also do that in TypeScript and Python, any Cloudflare worker. And in the interest of getting you all hacking very soon, I'm going to wrap this up. If you would like that code, this is the QR code. You can rickroll your friends, and it will also be in the Dagger Discord. And if you want to do yoga, we call it Yoga AI. That's not showing all the way. Yoga AI posts AIEWF edition with Cloudflare Stitch and Replicate on the Cloudflare Office rooftop. Swix said he would be in attendance. Then go to this QR code. Thank you all for listening, and I will be here all night answering questions about Cloudflare and also Dagger, because I've built a Dagger agent and it was very easy to do so. So hack away.
Thank you to the very nice people who let me borrow their power supply when I was down to 2%. So I won't run my whole thing for you, but I'll show it to you quickly. I basically just modified the multi-agent demo, which goes and gets the weather and then tells you if you need to wear a coat. And the really cool thing about that is that that project, writes the scraper to go and get the weather data for you in Go and then parses that. So I really have a hard time reading the news recently because everything sucks. And even like Hacker News brings me down. So I thought I would modify this and make something that takes the top Hacker News story. So it writes a Go script to fetch the top story from Hacker News. And then it converts it into, I don't know how many of you are fans of Terry Pratchett, but I really like Terry Pratchett. And so what it does is it translates the news into the Ankh Morpork news style, but it still maintains the original spirit of it. So currently on Hacker News right now, there's a 3D SVG renderer. That's the top story. And when I run it, let me see. Okay. Ankh Morpork Times special report. Wizard's latest invention claims to render reality without actually rendering reality. And then just, using Claude, really, and the creativity of Claude. It created a very palatable story that actually captured my attention. And, it does actually capture the content. It is about a 3D SVG renderer. And then I also wanted it to give career advice because, every time I read Hacker News, I'm like, shit, is there a career in programming much longer? I have friends at Google who are ditching right now. But yeah, that's my little presentation, and I banged it out pretty quickly, and it worked well. And thank you, Dagger, for letting me participate.
My name is Arvind. I have a small company which makes universal GitOps deployment controller. Has no LLM inside of it. It's purely good old legacy automation. The idea is Argo CD is good for Kubernetes, but then there are people who don't like Kubernetes for some reason. For them, there is Lambda and ECS and Cloud Run and EC2, good old VMs. So I want to see if we can make a smart GitOps which can deploy everywhere, okay? And I don't like YAML, so that's why I'm interested in Dagger, because it provides relief from YAML, in my mind at least. So what I did here was, my product is called GitMoxie, and what I wanted to do was imagine that you built your app, and now you want to take that container image and you want to do the deployment, blue, green, canary, whatnot, right? So here what I'm doing is I'm invoking the Gitmoxy endpoint, which is currently running on my own laptop here. And I have a simple CLI which invokes the endpoint, right? So nothing fancy. But the good thing is it's pretty clean, right? It's programmable. You build the container, you install the package, you invoke the endpoint. Rest, all the details are in your Git repository. So in this case, you are passing the repository and the branch, right? So for example, it's your main branch. So let's see this in action a little bit. Hopefully it will work. It wasn't working. So the thing that wasn't working is that this whole program wasn't getting executed, because you can see that nothing changes in this. The repository is the same and the branch is the same, right? But everything inside those branches is changing, but from Dagger's perspective, everything is constant. So it was just replaying commit from like 20 minutes ago. No changes were getting picked up. So you see over here this cool thing called Cache Buster that Julian found out for me. This causes you to recreate the container image again and again, and it's a bit of a hack there. So let's see, what do we want to do here? Maybe change my, do I have time to do this? This might be a little bit longer. Okay. Hang on. So I'm gonna go ahead and, I have this simple container deployment. It has, it's supposed to be an NGINX service, but some smart developers rolled out HTTPD in this, so that's not good, right? So we're gonna change that to NGINX, right? And what we will do is we'll commit those changes. We'll say, hey, we'll fix those. So here is the repository where you have those container deployment, right? And we're gonna commit this. So we'll say, switch it back to NGINX. And that's good, and you do the git push. By the way, the Kubernetes folks are pretty familiar with this. They do this day in, day out. Update the YAML, push the changes, GitOps controller like Argo CD picks up and deploys it everywhere. And if you are an application developer, this is all the toil that your operations people have, so have appreciation for them. Buy them a coffee or beer or something. They deal with a lot. Okay, so we push this change, and now we are going to go to Dagger, and we're going to say, just do the Dagger deploy. So we just gave it the repo and the branch where we did all those changes, and should go ahead and do the composable CI/CD thing as promised. Hopefully this is big enough. It's just going to build the container, invoke my deployment controller, and boom, it says, hey, you changed these files. I'm going to go ahead and create a new deployment, and you can see that some things are going on in the back. Fair enough. From a Dagger perspective, all you want to know is that it is a pretty nice, clean, YAML-free, composable way of doing CI/CD at least. No agent, sorry. I made the agent last time. All right, cool, thanks.
So I'm a staff engineer at a very large company, and I find that it's often most of what I am doing is asking people to review design docs or line people up or unblock people or stuff like that. One of the problems with documentation in general is that unlike code, where I have linters, compilers, test tools, and all that to tell me when I'm messing up, I don't have this. And in particular, a recent experience was I was writing something, and I spent like several hours on this earlier in the day. My teammate was on the other side of the world and was thus unable to review it until after I had gone home. And by the time I woke up the next day to see her comments on it, I had neglected to explain most of the system in said document. So there were a lot of confusion style questions. And I think that, so what I've tried to build here is a tool to automate the early parts of document review. So this is an agent in Dagger. Sorry? Oh, absolutely. There we go. Okay. So this is an agent that you invoke with the review doc command. You can specify a persona and a document. So I have created this example here. Also, because naming is everything, a tool must be, a tool that reviews docs might be called Docker. I recognize that name is already taken, therefore this is Docker spelled like soccer. So 2 people that I have recently written documents for. So Aishwarya is a site reliability engineer on my team who has these roles and expertises. And Goran is a technical marketing engineer on my team. So we're going to see how these people review this document here, which is an overly simplistic document intended to show what an early draft might look like. So, so here we're going to feed this to the LLM. This is using Gemini free tier. And here we can see that it has been generated. Specific comments made on different parts of the document are, this should probably have diagrams, should probably talk about monitoring, logging, and alerting, things that an SRE would care about. And now I will have Goran review this. As Goran writes more documentation for customers, Goran calls out what exactly the architecture looks like, and all this. The initial plan was to have this hooked up to GitHub and to generate PR comments and stuff. However, scope gets cut.
What up, guys? My name is Ariel, and I'm from New York City. You can tell by my Brooklyn accent. So today we're going to be I'm going to be showcasing one of the things I did with Dagger. One thing I wanted to mind you, I am not really a developer. So when I first saw Dagger at one of the workshops, I had no idea what Dagger is. Until I watched it, and then this tonight I got a little bit of clarity. But today I want to show you something that I just completely just vibe code the whole thing. So the first thing that I did, I was trying to build out a project, but what I did is I went to ChatGPT, and of course I'm like, teach me how to use Dagger AI as a non-developer. How can I vibe code with it? So it just gave me this whole thing about it. What is Dagger AI? Use cases for non-developers. And then the next part I talked about is I wanted to just make some idea. Like I want an AI agent that can use Dagger, that can impress everyone at the hack night. Make it so I could easily build it in 5 minutes. Well, it honestly took around 1 hour. So I asked it to give me some ideas, and it got some really nice ideas, like AI-powered website health inspector. There's AI release notes generator from GitHub. But I did the one that's number 6, AI news summarizer for your niche. Basically, it just scrapes the web, looks up the articles for whatever niche you want to look for, and pulls out the articles in there. Now, what I did as a non-developer is I just copied the whole thing, and I pasted it into Claude, and I said, I'm going to be using Dagger AI agents for building out this project. Write me a detailed prompt where I can easily copy and paste into Claude code, and it will automatically do all the work. So I pasted this whole thing, and it generated this whole prompt, and I just copied and pasted this into Windsurf. I put it into Claude code, and then let it just do its whole thing, deploying it. So how it's going to work, if I do Dagger functions, it's going to be spitting out these functions. So one of them is... Can you bump it up, Ariel? You can't see it? No. What about now? Perfect. So just from vibe coding this alone, it built out these functions. I got one for export newsletter. I have one for testing it out. And how it's going to work is that if I call, I had one of these these functions. Oops, don't look at my API key. But basically how it works is I put in these parameters, I can put in niche AI, I can put in niche dogs, how many articles that I want, and when I run the prompt, when I run it in there, it's going to put it in there. So if I go ahead and put it in there, it's going to go scan through the whole thing and then try to find all the articles. Currently, right now, it's incomplete because one of the issues that I'm facing is the Anthropic API key that's not on there. So, but overall, just for someone who's not like a developer at all, I was able to get this connected to Dagger Cloud. I can see everything what's going on within here, good things, bad things with it. And there we go. Thank you, guys.
Okay. So what did I build? So I was actually reading this paper. I don't know if anybody here has read it. So it's basically self-improving agents, right? So imagine an agent that can write itself. So I was thinking, can we do something like this with Dagger? So here is the loop. So basically this is a test-driven development, a true test-driven development, where you can just check in a failing test, and then the idea is it'll self-correct itself, and then finally you'll have an output which is a clean working code. So you check in a failing test, AI fixes code. So basically it's like fixing its own code because it's running in a sandbox environment. And then test pass, once it's done, it'll build and deploy. So deploy is basically just like, check in, you could like check into a GitHub repo. That's what I was actually trying to do, but it didn't work. But essentially, you're just like spinning up a Node.js container, installing dependencies, basically the same, the GitHub repo, right? And then you have an agent that checks for failing tests, fixes the tests. Once it passes, you're just pushing the same code to GitHub. So here is the demo. Okay. So
that could be a little bigger also.
all right. Yeah. So it's called Looper. Basically, it'll just loop itself until all the tests pass. So let's see. I have just simple math test. Just nothing too fancy. Calculate area, things like this. Cursor didn't do any better. It just wrote this test case. For some reason, it's slow, but yeah. There we go. So it deployed Looper. So now it's basically, it installed the repo. It's running tests. So now it will try to fix. Okay, so here, this is GPT-4o trying to fix it. It's slow. Okay. So it's basically going in a loop trying to fix itself. Once it's all done, it should ideally push it to GitHub repo, but I guess there is some issue with installing, like spinning up this thing as a Git and then passing environment variables I couldn't like figure out, because this is like a sandbox off sandbox environment. But it just, oh. It'll do at some point, but I hope you guys are not bored. Yeah, so it's applying all these.
Did AI write the tests also? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
No, so I actually just checked in some random tests
Okay.
which are failing, and then the idea is like in sandbox environment, it's building itself, trying to fix all the tests. But maybe prompts are not good. It's still trying. Not super efficient.
What's the model?
4.0. Yeah, I mean, whatever, I tried.
Hi, my name is Tony. Okay, yeah, thank you. I work in New York, but I came from DC because it's where I live. So I came here because I never built an agent before, so I was just like, let me see how far I get. But this was a bit tough for me. I was only really able to, with the help of I forgot his name, Julian, I can't pronounce it. But he helped me with the starter, the quick start one. Anyway, so my idea was like to see if I could go from like a natural language, just like typing like an automation, to like having it set up like using N8N. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but it just like lets you build workflows. Now you can do this in Claude, so it's like this is just the wrapper I was trying to build out. But my thinking was if you could describe it, and then if you guys used Replit before, like when you work with Replit, it would ask you what's your credentials, API keys, and all of that. And by the time Replit is done, you have like a working app with everything connected. So I was thinking, okay, it would be cool if you could have the same thing with N8N, because you can do it with Claude, but then Claude is going to give you something like 80% there, but it's not going to be connected up, and it's not going to spit out something that works. So that was just kind of my thinking. I was just working with Cloud Code, and we were using a Streamlit. It was my first time. I never knew like you could create this amount of like UI with Python, but that's what it did. And then I tried to give it like some examples of the nodes in N8N from like the documentation. So I spent some time just trying to plan that out. So we had like some, for example, like we'd say maybe create a form for capturing leads, blah, blah. And then the idea is that this would kick off the agent. So it was meant to use Claude, and then there's also an N8N API we're going to connect to so that like it could just push it directly to N8N. But as you guys can see, once I tried to run that, I ran into some of the issues with Dagger. So I was trying to debug that, but obviously not enough time. So yeah.
Hey, my name is Nick, and I run an advertising business out in New York. So my initial interest in coming to this conference was just to understand multi-agent systems, because we want to build agents to first generate content and then QA the content and then back and forth until it meets our quality standards. So I thought, what better way to do that than to create a multi-agent system in which two agents, I guess, one agent reads the news, the other agent tries to gaslight this agent into believing the news is fake, and then the evaluator agent evaluates whether the user has been sufficiently gaslit or not. So this is the article that I chose to gaslight the user on, this Nintendo Switch coming out. Yeah, so I was running into a lot of issues with the scraper, so I just had to basically put into hard-coded text here. So now if we just run it. Oh, wait, 1 second. Okay. Cool. Yeah, so now the user is evaluating the article and forming opinions on it, and then the gaslighter will just read the user's response and back and forth until the user is sufficiently gaslit. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, So far, I haven't been able to get it to actually gaslight the user successfully, but maybe I could do that by using Claude Haiku or something as the user in Gemini as the gaslighter. But yeah, a lot of work to be done here, but yeah. Yeah, so the user is like psychologically insecure, and then the gaslighter is allowed to become more and more aggressive and more subversive with each iteration. But yeah, thanks guys.
I'm Ren. Okay, apologize to any DB admins in the crowd, but I think writing DB schemas sucks. So I wanted to put together something that would take sort of a plain text description of a database that you need and write a schema for you. So I have game db.text here. It just says I'm writing a game. I need a database that has characters, enemies, and items that have some properties. And we'll go ahead and say enemies may or may not be immune to firewall. Cool. So I'm gonna restart Dagger real quick. And so there are a few functions here. Complete database, or sorry, SQLite schema. We'll just build a SQLite schema based on this prompt that I give it. Populate schema, we'll go ahead and fill that in with a bunch of fake data. But in the interest of brevity, I'll just use complete database, which calls both of these. So if I, okay, this. So complete database, gamedb.text, and then I'll export that to that file. This is, you know, doing the thing. Asking an AI to figure out a schema for me. And then it's going to generate a whole bunch of data and put it in that table. All right, almost done. Cool. So I have my gamedb.db here, but I want to actually see what that looks like. So I have another function here, which is called dump database. And I'll export that to, okay, dump db. That just takes a second because that doesn't even call an agent. And we can see what it came up with. So we've got our whole database schema here, which is written in however you define a database schema in SQLite. And then it went and dumped all of our generated fake data here. So we've got a table full of characters and enemies, items. And yeah, that's it.
Hello, my name is Joy.
My name is Kamil.
So we're gonna just run our agent because it takes some time. But anyways, so we didn't have an idea coming in here, and we were inspired by the initial presentation on creating documentation for code base. And so we thought, wow, how boring. So instead, we decided to create an agent that will take a code base and write you a story. Do you want to talk about how the code base you're using?
Yeah, so at first we thought that we will use, we will use some great huge repository like a Daggers, but then my usage of OpenAI tokens skyrocketed, so I've chosen to use a smaller one. And for now, exit code 1. So let's do it again. Let's pretend that we didn't see it. Yeah. So now I'm using just a little small repository from the workshops from today's conference. So it will be faster for us.
Do you want to show the completed story, or do we just want to wait?
Yeah. So during we wait, I can show like the completed story because why not? And yeah, it's still loading, so.
Do you want to split screen it? Yeah, we'll let you read like one of the example outputs we got. It's pretty entertaining. about the other one?
Yeah, so I hope that you can read anything, because, and this is the another repo that we used at the previous a few minutes before the demo, so that it wouldn't take time. Yeah, and that's it. Yes. So this is it. This is the story about the repository of mixture of agents. And yeah, this is quite funny, so it worked.